Hey there. Today I attended a presentation by leadership of the U.S. Forest Service and other agencies, particularly those that are involved with researching and planning wildfire mitigation here in Boulder County. They walked us through all of the work they do for prescribed burns and actually lit pile burns for us and showed us the process for making those burns as safe as possible and helped us understand why those burns are so essential for reducing the risk of wildfire in Boulder County. We learned a lot. Here's the presentation.
So good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out. My name is Mike Smith. I work for the Forest Service here on the Arapahoe Roosevelt, and I'll start us off, but let's just do a quick round of introductions.
Chad Bueser, U.S. Forest Service Zone Fuels Planner.
Good morning, everyone. It is still morning, right? Yes. Nate Hallam, Battalion Chief 1-1 out of Boulder. Work suppression, but pretty passionate about fuel. So, yeah.
Awesome. And then we've got Maria here from our information shop. She'll be shooting a bunch of video today. Sounds like we've got some other folks doing video. So the intent today, my job is zone prevention specialist. So really one of my primary jobs is to help prevent unwanted human-caused fires, but also to help with messaging. And prescribed fire is such an important part of the restoration of the ecosystem that we spend a lot of time in the prevention shop trying to find different ways to incorporate the public and really try and have a better cooperative relationship together. So Maya and I were literally at a meeting last week, and she threw out this idea. I knew we'd tried to do this last year, but the weather conditions weren't favorable. They're still not super favorable today, but they're good enough that we can be here. We'll talk a lot more about that as we go forward. So the intent for today is to run you through a quick talk about how we get to today. So how do we pick a unit to do thinning and project work on? What's the treatment going to be? And then we'll go into how do we burn piles. Nate is our burn boss of record for the day. He'll take us through what we call the go, no-go process. And Charlie, I missed you. I'm sorry. Get Charlie Rayner here from the...
I'm Charlie Rayner, Fire Prevention Officer.
So the go, no-go process is basically part of the legal process that we go through before we put fire on the ground. It's a very serious thing when we put fire on the ground, and there's a lot of work that goes into that, and we'll go more into depth. But again, our intent for today is to hopefully take some of the fear out of this. There's a lot of fear in burning. There's a lot of fear when people see smoke in the air, and there is a time and a place that when there's smoke in the air, we're paying pretty close attention too. But this time of year, when we've got the right conditions that we can put fire on the ground and keep it in the areas that we want to, it's a really important part of our restoration process. So I guess to kick it off, I'll give it to Chad to talk about how we get to this point in the process.
Sure. So this project is part of the Forsyth 2 project, which started quite a few years ago, and it's evolved to the point where we are getting to the phase of the burning of piles from work that we've done. So these piles are the product of a treatment that was done, I think, 3 years ago, about that. And so now they've cured. We typically let them cure for about a year, and now we're ready to get them burned when the conditions are right. So to get the right to figure out when those conditions are, we go through a burn planning process, and it's a agency requirement that anytime we're burning, we're doing a burn plan. And so these piles are covered under a burn plan that we did for the entire district for all the other projects, including this one. And so that sets what we have to do when we burn the piles. So some of the requirements are snow cover, that we have to have the requisite amount of snow cover. We have to have, can't be too windy. And so a lot of those components get factored into the burn plan of how many resources do we need and how do we, monitor after we burn the piles. Another big piece that is baked into the burn plan is we have to follow the state air quality regulations and apply for a smoke permit for burning piles. So we have several smoke permits for various projects, and each smoke permit might be a little bit different. And so the smoke permit will dictate how many piles we can burn on a given day, or if we can even burn on a given day. So today is, I'll let Nate go into that a little bit more, but there's a lot of layers of processes that we have to go through before we can get to actually lighting any of our piles. And a lot of planning and working with the Weather Service on forecast goes into all that and trying to figure out when is the right time to burn the piles that we're looking at. So that's kind of in a nutshell about the burn plan piece of it. Nate, you want to?
Real quick, can you talk maybe about how we got to, how this unit was chosen and how it ties into the broader forest project?
Yeah, so this unit was chosen. It's adjacent to Magnolia Road. It's a potential reinforcement of using that road as a potential holding feature in a wildfire, and also it's going to reduce the fire behavior if we do have fire in this unit. It's opened up quite a bit from the trees that were removed, and has basically been trying to promote the aspen in this unit so that the aspen can try and take over a little bit more, where the conifers, primarily the Douglas fir, has been kind of shading out some of the aspens that have been here. So that's essentially the goal of what we're treating here.
And there's a lot of things that go into this, we're all in the fire shop, and we're pretty fire centric in our thought processes, but there's also ecological benefits. We're trying to restore what humans have basically tipped the balance on since 1910 in the Fire Suppression Act of, we've been fighting fire for so long, and that's why our forests are so overgrown and chock full of unwanted species in some places. If you look at some of the old photos of like the city of Boulder, Ponderosa pine used to be much further up. That was a grassland savanna down there. And because we've suppressed fire, we've got species moving all over the place. So what we look at when we look at the woods today isn't natural. It is nature, but it's not natural. We've interfered with those natural processes. So we're spending a lot of time trying to come back to where we think it should be. And there's a lot that goes into that, and there's a lot of, we call them the ologists, all the wildlife biologists and hydrologists and ecologists and all the people with lots of letters after their name spend a lot of time building these processes. So with that, we'll go to Nate.
Yeah, and I guess, did you all get a map of the unit? No. I'm going to pass this around. Okay, yeah, if you want to pass this around, this will give you a broader understanding of how all this connects. Taking a look at this map, it'll kind of show you how it moves north into the Forsyth prescribed fire. We did this last year, and the pile units up through there. So trying to draw this north-south like boundary or buffer to where we actually got something that we could catch a fire in if it started up west of here and started moving down. This is much more of an operational task that could be accomplished in this open canopy versus in a tight canopy. It's going to take a lot of machinery to try to get in there and get line around a wildfire in it. So this open stuff, not only can we get in and suppress it on the ground, but aviation resources can get their retardant and their water actually down to the ground versus getting hung up in the canopy. So yeah, take a look at that map. Once you all get that, we're in the northeast side of this unit. When you're looking at it, it's going to be unit 53 when you're looking. Pretty small unit overall, but gives you a kind of general idea of where we're at in that unit 53. So for me as a burn boss, the first thing that I'm always thinking about before I'm even, as soon as I'm tasked, it is like, what are my safety concerns out there? It's not just the day of when we're burning, it's not just the firefighters on the ground, but it's the long duration safety aspect. And this unit here, right away, what stands out to me, I got someone camping down below here within the unit. I got a tent that's over on the other side of the unit on the 321 road. Where is that individual? So like first thing when I showed up this morning is walking the perimeter, making sure there's not somebody asleep out there, which I hope they're not, but just somebody in a bad spot, and try to communicate that to the people here within the unit. And then outside the unit, we start that days before, right? So you all got this notification to come out here to join us. But then we got a plethora of cooperators and other people that get emails, updates whenever we're doing our broadcast burning or pile burning. And that'd be our local volunteer fire departments, structure departments, Boulder County Dispatch, Fort Collins Dispatch, working with North Zone Forest Service resources to make sure they're available to come backfill if we have something happen over the nighttime. Just a lot of coordination to make sure that we got all the pieces here, not only for the day of the operation, but to continue on until we see it to the end when it's out. So looking at these pile units here, these are great piles as far as like total size. These are going to consume pretty well. So for me, looking at these, there's not a whole lot of residual time to these piles compared to some of our larger ones. So like this, 48 hours from now, I'm not going to have any concern with. More than likely, we're going to come in and check it. But 70 to 80, a week out, this is going to be looking really good. There might be one little duffer smoking out here. But if I'm seeing higher volume piles, that means I'm going to have a longer duration heat. That's going to extend the amount of time we're going to have to be out here to watch this. Also going to make us have to take a deep, hard look into our drought indices into the future forecast. Like 2 weeks out, are we looking at a drying trend coming in that's going to come back and bite us? And are we going to be able to get this whole thing hemmed in before that wind event happens or that drying trend comes? So that's a lot of the stuff that goes into the initial no-go in my thought process, is making sure that we can be safe out here on the ground, not only the day of, but the extended duration of the burn. Then moving on, we got our burn plan. This can be multiple pages worth of documentation that we have to go through and make sure that we're following everything to a T. But the big one I always want to read it into is like, why am I here? And that usually is defined within our objectives. So the objectives for this burn is reduce activity and natural fuel accumulations to reduce potential fire behavior and limit mortality of remaining overstory trees from future wildfires. So like I talked about, is opening up the canopy, making it an easier ground to suppress wildfires in. So that's the number one objective. I can get behind that, right? I feel like that's something that's worth me coming out here to do today. The second one, build a defensible fuel profile zone around private property and adjacent Forest Service lands. When you're looking at that map, you can see that, right? We're working along the Forest Service where we can to try to create some buffer along your private property boundaries. So when people are like, why are we burning right up against my backyard? Well, in a wildfire situation, that's a lot of the times the one place that we're going to go to suppress it is in your backyard, because your value is our number one risk. That's what we're trying to take care of, human life and then the values. So us trying to go out and save a tree up on the forest isn't as important as getting the boots on the ground around your homes and your values out there. So I can get behind that objective for coming out here today. And then provide training and fire use operations for agency staff and cooperating resources. So this is a great example right here. You all coming out here to understand why we're doing the job we're doing. And that's also, we've been bringing in Left Hand Canyon to help us with prescribed fire. We got Timberline coming in, multitude of local cooperators coming to help us burn so they can kind of understand our practices. And then they also know what they're getting into when they get a call in the middle of the night that there's a smoke report out in the pile unit. They're like, oh, I was just there 4 hours ago. I think I know where they're talking about. So it just kind of helps us all kind of be on the same page. So objectives are a big one that I'm looking at for resource objectives. Prescription objectives. So ignite at least 90% of the available piles except where project design criteria requires additional wildlife pile retentions or exclusions. What that means is we're going to look at leaving 10% of the piles out here. 1 pile per acre is a lot of the times what we're shooting for. Because what happens, we come out and we build all these piles. It takes 3 or 4 years to burn them. And the bunnies all of a sudden have come in and made homes in them, right? We created a habitat for them. So rather than coming in and just burning up all their homes, at least we're leaving 10% behind that they can go find refuge, and we're not killing out something that we've established through our management practice out here, right? So that's another one. An average of at least 80% consumption for all pile fuels. So I want 80% of all that fuel to be consumed by the end of the operation or the burn period for that. So if there's, 50% of that is still sitting there, and that's where I figured out during the test fire, and you'll see that here in a little bit, we'll burn the test piles, and if they're not consuming well, If they're only burning like a quarter of it and they start going out, we're just going to scrap it. Today's not a good day. Maybe there's too much moisture in that pile and we got to come back another day. Or maybe the piles just weren't built real well and they're just too loose and fluffy and they're just not consuming. So we want to get that consumption. So that's kind of the rundown of our objectives. So the go, no go is element 2B in the burn plan. This is what we do actually on site after we've actually gone through everything else back in the office. Like my day started at 5 o'clock this morning, looking at weather, we're looking at spot forecasts, we're looking at the burn plan again to make sure that we know we're following the rules and regs. So we've kind of got everything dialed. We know that the weather conditions are all looking good for going out here today, at least for 50 piles, because we have a poor ventilation. So with that poor ventilation, as long as we have a 4 mile per hour sustained wind, we can burn up to 50 piles that day. I was really hoping that we'd have an excellent, so you all can see 1,000 pile a day, but today is just going to be 50. So that's what kind of dictates a lot of that is the ventilation. There'll be days that we have amazing snow, but we have ventilation that's poor. So it's like, is it worth taking 4 people 5 miles in on a UTV just to burn 5 piles or 50 piles? So that's where we come to these areas right off the highway. 50 piles here is lucrative because I can knock these out today. I can chunk these piles so that way it's not a eyesore for people driving by. They're not going to call it in all night. I can be a little more tactful with a smaller operation. 1,000 pile days though, going back and chunking 1,000 piles is impossible. But that's where we get our catch-up days, right? 1,000 pile days where we're catching up with the amount of piles that are being created out on the landscape. So yeah, sorry.
So you need more, good ventilation means more wind. Like today, there's not enough wind to do a lot of piles. Is that what you're saying?
No, no. So you could have an excellent ventilation. The wind really isn't a factor.
What is the ventilation?
So ventilation adjective is based off of how high of a ceiling we have for our atmosphere right now. So we could have a totally calm day, but it could be climbing 20,000 feet to smoke. So with that ventilation is now happening on a broader scale.
And what creates the conditions that the atmosphere will draw, because you want the smoke drawn up, not blown across. Right?
It's an unstable atmosphere is what we're looking for. Yep.
There's another factor to that, this is where the wind comes in, is that upward movement of the smoke, and then the transport winds are factored into that ventilation rating. So when we have high transport winds, sometimes we also have high surface winds. So
and that's not good, right? Surface wind is not your friend.
It is.
It can be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for a unit like this with the amount of snow that we have, it very well could be for our consumption. Yeah. No, great question. All right, so moving on with the go, no go. The first element primary questions that they have in here, have conditions in or adjacent to the ignition unit changed? So has there been a drought condition come in? Has the snow melted off? Those are big factors. Have our live fuel moistures somehow dropped drastically that we're going to increase mortality? Those are the things that we're looking at for whenever conditions changed. The conditions have not changed in the last week that I've been coming out here looking at this and looking at the extended forecast. We're looking to continue to get the cloud cover. So I see the snow being locked in for the duration of heat that we have out here. So I don't see a condition change affecting this from the forecast and from the extended forecast that we're seeing out there. So with that one, I'm going to go ahead and circle a yes. A no. And then has the prescribed fire plan been reviewed and an amendment been approved, or has it been determined that no amendment is necessary? So we go through this every year with our pile burn units, and we'll do amendments a lot of the times with our burn plans or add units to it. So Tim Egan was able to work on all that stuff back in November and got all the tech review and everything completed on the burn plan. So we're looking good for this year. So on that one, has the experience, qualifications, internal, external pressures, and fatigue levels of the implementation team has been evaluated and identified concerns have been satisfactorily mitigated? So with that, if we're coming into like March and we're still out here burning piles and we're still burning piles with the same 4 people that we've been burning since, say, come October, November, that's a fatigue factor, right? So we need to maybe pump the brakes a little bit there and make sure that our folks aren't getting burnt out, because we want them to come back again next year and do it all over, right? We don't want them to move somewhere else and be like, they worked me into the ground on the Boulder Ranger District. I don't want to work there anymore. So So that's one factor that we're looking into it. Internal and external pressures. So that's not only agency. So like when we had the escape wildfires down in New Mexico a couple years ago, that's an internal pressure, right? So that brought it back. The heat was on. We had to go through and review of all of our stuff, make sure everything was dialed so we could get back into the swing of things and make sure we weren't going down the path that happened down in New Mexico. External factors. So that's you all. We want to build trust amongst you all, and that's why you're here, to see what we're doing out on the ground. Because if we don't develop that trust, we try to hide things from you all. Now we have an external pressure, right? You all are calling your congressman, things like that. And now the whole program's shut down because of that. So we want to make sure that we're getting the information out there. We're being transparent with what we're doing out on the ground. So that way it helps us with those external pressures. Moving on in the go, no go, have all permits and clearances been obtained? So permits and clearances, that smoke permit that we were talking about earlier, I got a copy of it here with me. So with that, we have to make sure we got a smoke permit for this unit. It is 1 calendar year, so it has to be reissued at the beginning of the calendar year. A lot of stuff in the federal service does fiscal years, so it kind of are things all juggled different times of the year when we got to get it done. Every burn permit is going to be a little bit different too, so making sure that we're taking a good hard look at that. If we've been burning elsewhere, when we start moving down into your neighborhood in this area, it's a little more restrictive. We got more homes around it. If I'm burning up in the Cameron Peak burn scar out in the middle of nowhere, there's very few restrictions out there because we're not going to impact as many people. So they could burn maybe the double amount of piles that we could here. So that's another factor. So all permits are in place. Have all the required notifications been made? So that's something that we start weeks in advance with email notifications. We do it the day before with making sure that we got all of our cooperators and our contingency resources within play. They're going to be here to show up for us if needed. Then we're also looking at, the notifications like smoke sensitive citizens out here. So contacting them, letting them know that we have a burn going on in their area. So that way they can do things to mitigate that in case it does, keep it from impacting their health. So we do all those notifications. So we're good there for this burn today. The next one, have all the pre-burn considerations, preparation work identified in the prescribed fire plan been completed or addressed and checked? So on a pile burn unit like this, it's not as in-depth as when we do like a broadcast burn. That's where I'm thinking, like, do we already have our hand lines in place? Do we have hose lays ready to go, like on Forsyth? For this, it's more like, do we have our contingency resources available if something were to happen in this area? Do I have adequate snow around the periphery of the unit if it did start to creep around in these bare spots? Is it going to find a way out of the unit into a bigger bald area and do more consumption? Things like that we're looking at for pre-burn considerations. And then have all required current and project fire weather forecasts been obtained, and are they favorable through ignitions, holding, and mop-up control phases of the project? And I'm going to say yes on that, and that's because we looked at the forecast not only for today, extended, like I talked about earlier. We're looking not only the safety today, but the future until this duration of this project is done. The other thing we do is, like for me today, if weather forecast does not show like I was forecasted, I have a direct line that I can call the National Weather Service and be like, hey, your forecast is not matching what I'm seeing on the ground. This is what I'm seeing. Can you do some adjustments and tell me what you're seeing now? And then that's another way. We're not only going off of that morning. If we don't see what was forecasted, we'll call and get an update on that. And then are all prescription parameters met? So with that, prescription parameters, we already kind of talked about. We got to have 6 inches of snow, over 90% of the unit, and then not only in the unit, but around the unit. So outside the unit, this is a big one we got to think about, right? Because I could have great snow in the unit, but I light it up and it spots over into a bare area that burns up 40 acres. So we got to be looking around the whole unit. So like this morning, I walked around the periphery of the unit, made sure everything was still looking good there. We had no holding concerns outside that unit. Are all smoke management specifications met? So that's where we submit our Form Delta in the morning to the Colorado Smoke Monitoring. And then with that, I go off of what the adjective is for the day. And I let them know, hey, I'm looking to burn 50 piles out at this unit today based off the permit you gave me. We're within these prescription parameters. And then at the end of the day, I'll go back and submit a Form Echo is what it's called. And that's just what we completed for the day. So the morning I send what I expect to do. And at the end of the day, maybe we only burn 20 piles. So I'll update them why we only burn the 20 piles. But we don't go over that 50 unless the forecast changed up the ventilation. And that's where we'll have to communicate with the state, because they're going to get a freaking red flag if I put in for 50 piles in the morning and then that night they get a notification that I burned 1,000. My boss's boss is going to get a phone call. Yeah, so they want to make sure that we're staying within the regulations or the rules written. So we're within that. Have all planned operations, personnel, and equipment on site available and operational. So for this pile burn unit, we got plenty of snow around the periphery. We got the contingency resource back in the barn. But this is all we need, really. For 50 pile a day, it may only be 2 people go out and burn it, as long as we got no holding concerns at all. And really, that's almost ideal. If I lined out 20 people to go burn this unit, 19 of those people would have smoke inhalation at the end of the day. But with 2 people, 3 people, you can kind of stay away from each other and not impact each other with smoke and kind of get through the unit a lot quicker than in trying to line out a bunch of people. So yes to that one. Has the availability of contingency resources applicable to today's implementation been checked, and are they available? So we talked to the North Zone. They got resources available. If we had something today that they could come down and help out. We got left-hand fire, or left-hand canyon that we could bring in. We got Timberline. Hey, we got Boulder County here. So yeah, we got folks that we could bring in to help us out. But really making sure we got communication with those key partners that we would bring in and that they are available. That's the big thing with contingency resources, is not that they are available from their barn, but they may run on a 911 call and now they're no longer available. Are they available? Are they tied in with us? So Left Hand, Timberline are tied in to help us out with that. Let's see. And then the final, have all personnel been briefed on the project objectives, their assignment, safety hazards, escape routes, and safety zones? So we've all been through the JHA. We have a job hazard analysis or a risk analysis that we go through. I'm not going to go through it with all of you for today because you will not be doing ignitions, but I think it'd be good for us just real quick to go over to tailgate safety, just to discuss some of the critical factors that could injure you all here today while viewing this. So what do you think they may be? I'm not going to name them out. I think you all probably can come up with a few. Smoke inhalation, right? Trip hazards, right? Yeah, so we're waiting around in deep snow out here. Radiant heat.
On the road.
Oh, sorry, what was
How
that?
about up on the road?
Smoke again.
Smoke or traffic.
Or traffic.
Yeah.
So the intent of this is to identify the hazards and then come up with a mitigation. So we know that we've got a certain level of hazard with each of these things that we identify, and then we try to figure out what we can do to lower that hazard risk. We can never eliminate hazard, but we can mitigate it down to a more acceptable level. Driving here was probably the riskiest thing you did today.
Yeah, so I'm going to write these down. We got smoke, we got trip, we got traffic, and then we also got the heat exposure itself, right? So the piles that we're burning here, let's just not get too close to them. Let's not get downwind of them and get licked by the flames. It sounds silly, but the first time I burned on this forest, when I moved here from the Boise, I took 2 people out burning, and by the end of the day, one had lost half his beard and the other one lost an eyebrow. You know, it's like, so.
Keep that thing away from the pile.
Yeah.
When it gets singed, the pile burns.
Yep. So anything else? So I guess to go through the tailgate real quick though, for the smoke exposure, let's just not get upwind or downwind, I'm sorry, of these piles while we're burning out here today. Easier said than done sometimes. You might have to move around a little bit, but just let's not be choking ourselves out. For the trip hazard, we're just keeping it to this area right here for you guys today. We're going to ask that you not roam around throughout the unit after we've lit it. But at least in this area here, you can sit and visually watch what we're doing and burn these piles. But I just ask that you not roam on through the unit. I can't tell you can't, but it'd be good for us to just mitigate that and just keep everybody in this area. The traffic piece, whenever you guys get up there next to the highway, just be aware, right? If you go to cross the road and you got a trail of people following behind you and you see a car coming, yell out car. Just not only be aware for yourself, but the other people around you. And then the direct heat is just like the smoke. Let's just not get too close to the piles after they've been lit. Yeah, stand back and observe. With that, I completed the go, no-go checklist. We've gone over a quick tailgate safety. Any questions?
So again, Nate's going to jump on the radio and
Yeah, I'll head over there and call him.
he'll call Fort Collins dispatch as well as the local county dispatch and let them know we're getting ready to start our test fire. That test fire can be anywhere from 10 to 20 piles. Some people go bigger if you're further out, where there's fewer public impacts. But here we got a road next to us. We've got Boulder Canyon below us. With the the smoke adjective rating today of poor, I don't expect to see this smoke go cranking way up in the sky, which is unfortunate, but that's why our pile number is so limited. The wind part that was brought up is always a question that we want to bring up, because a lot of people get concerned. When we were burning the machine piles and some of the stuff over in Gilpin County, there was a lot of concern about the high winds. Now, once we get into a high wind warning, we generally are going to try not to be burning in those conditions. But winds are in our favor when we have snow in the right conditions, because it helps us consume the material on the ground quicker. It also helps disperse our smoke. And that's a big part of this, is how quickly can we get this smoke out of here and minimizing those impacts. So a lot of people, in the summer, for firefighters, wind is a real challenge. It's one of the biggest challenges we face. But in the winter, again, it can be our friend. And I know it's hard for people that aren't practitioners that live in this environment all the time to understand why the seasonality is different for us. But for these conditions, we probably got 3 to 5 mile an hour winds right now. And that's what we want. I would take 15 to 20 and be darn happy about it. So all the notifications keep coming out from all the other burns. So we're currently burning 2 other places today. We're burning over on the ridge between Lazy Z and Pine Cliff. That's also part of the Foresight 2 project. And we're burning down in Gilpin County above Central City on the Yankee Hill Bald Mountain project. They actually have a better air down there today, and that just tells you how terrain influences can also affect that. But they've got fair air, so I think they're going after 400 today.
They have a different permit, so it's called marginal.
Oh, that's right. They're under the experimental. So we work with the Air Pollution Control Division, APCD, that's state smoke, a lot of the times, and they're constantly trying to learn more about when we can and when we can't. Are there terrain influences? Are there weather influences that might not be as easily identified on the general forecast? So a lot of the time they might say, hey, why don't you try a couple of these parameters? And so we work with that, and that's what we call an experimental. This is a standard permit here. So, but that wind thing is a big part for us. And we hope that when you all leave here, you're going to have a better understanding, and you're going to go back on your local neighborhood chat groups and things and share. And when you see people being concerned on the days we're burning and bad mouthing us up one side and down the other, that you can help mitigate some of those things. That's really, from Charlie and from the prevention shop, we spend a lot of time working on that. I do want to hand this around. This has a bunch of good stuff on it. There's a thing called the interactive map, and I'm going to keep one so I remember what I'm going to talk about. But who's looked at the Arapahoe Roosevelt prescribed fire map, the interactive map? So this is a pretty slick tool that you can just look at on the web, and you can see where every one of our projects are, from broadcast burning to pile burning. You can see whether it's in the planning phase, if it's in the active phase, or it's completed. And Chad, I think you do all the updating on that. We got people up on the north zone that do it for their side. And there are some really great tools on here. But again, there's a sign up on the news and info email sign up QR. If you're not signed up for the emails, please get that. And share that with your neighbors. That's going to go a long ways to helping. But there's also a bunch of other stuff. There's the interactive map. There's the CDPHE, the Colorado Division of Public Health. So we've got a test fire going, and I'll stop talking here for a second. We'll just kind of, he's going to light that. We're going to start paying attention to what the smoke's doing. And another piece that a lot of people don't understand is really how few people it takes to burn piles. I mean, we can go out with 4 people and get 2,500 piles. You know, you can be really efficient, but you want to talk about a bunch of fit kids. The kids that are out on the ground implementing this stuff, they're stomping through at times waist deep snow, lighten a pile, going to the next one, lighten a pile, going to the next one. And then, you know, intermittently they'll stop and do this. Now, one of the things that you see, you're not going to see it as much on these units, but when there's more snow on the piles, is when we first light, it looks like there's a ton of smoke coming off of these things. And a large majority of that is actually water vapor. So it'll very quickly go from that dark, heavy looking smoke that's water vapor into a much cleaner looking burn. So these don't have much snow on it, so we're not going to get to really show you that, but that's expected for us. And a lot of the times when I've had friends, when I'm burning piles at home, and I've probably burned over 200 piles at home. I just live up the road. People will come over and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, there's so much smoke," and I'm like, "Wait 5 minutes," and it goes away and it becomes a very clean burn. So
does he have to communicate how that test pile is burning?
once he's done, so the test burn isn't generally just a pile. So he's going to light a series of piles. As the burn boss, he'll determine what's appropriate and representative. So on a broadcast burn, we always try to find a place on the unit that has representative fuels. For a pile burn, we're going to try and, you know, we're really, our test burn is to look at smoke.
And he's just taking a torch to it?
Yeah, he's just using a little butane torch. Sometimes we'll use a drip torch, which uses a mixture of gasoline and diesel fuel. But the liquors, the butane, when the piles are appropriately dried, cured.
He's just using one of these that you can get at the hardware store.
Yeah.
And it's super fast, super easy. It's much lighter than a drip torch. A lot of the time, you know, you're carrying a drip torch and an extra drip torch, and depending on how much you're doing, you're having to shuttle fuel around to refuel your drip torches.
He's not dripping fuel onto the pile and then lighting. He's
No, right now he's just shooting it with propane torch.
It's
Like,
already a torch. Yeah, he's just hot enough to where it starts.
yep.
And then
Man, they start fast.
Yeah, he's looking at the wind and
When there's snow on them, though,
available
sometimes
fuels
it'll
inside the pile,
the snow will
you know, they know
melt,
where
put
the
itself out.
dry spots are.
So these are perfect conditions to light them, and it's
One thing I
really
wanted
easy
to
with a
throw in
propane
was,
torch.
I didn't
kind of
realize
going
they
back to
went
the
up that
broadcast burn versus
easy.
pile burn discussion. This is a phase in the process. Right? We're trying to restore our forests. We're trying to get them back to healthy. We're trying to protect watersheds. And you know, when Chad sets up projects like this, and they're, you know, we have overstocked forests, and we come in, we thin trees, we, you know, get the ladder fuels, we make the piles. That's kind of one phase, and then this is another phase. And then, you know, ultimately the most efficient, effective, cost-effective way to treat a landscape, and the best way to treat a landscape, is with broadcast burning. You're going to get the most fuels reduction, the most hazard reduction, but it is more complex, and it does take a lot more resources, you know, people and engines and, you know, weather conditions and all these things to just remember, yeah, this is a phase in the process and of where we're trying to go, and there's so much work to do.
How does a broadcast fire work? How do you do that?
Well, so that's a great question. First of all, it is complex, takes a lot of people, but basically we'll have a project area. It takes years to set these project areas up to be able to put fire on the ground, to burn the surface in a way that is acceptable and effective. But it's a long process. It takes another burn plan. You know, just like we have a pile burn plan, we have a broadcast burn plan for each specific unit or project area. And it's, you know, a pile burn plan is this thick, a broadcast burn is this thick. There's so many elements to it, but I don't even know where to start.
You know, I would just think in the big, broad picture, you know, if we were trying to burn this as a broadcast burn unit, first thing we look at is wind, the next thing we look at is slope, the third thing we look at is fuel loading. So ideally, we want to control the burning. We don't want, you know, like a crown fire like you see in the news. We want fire to be low intensity on the ground. So here, if we've got wind like we do blowing from the north, and we've got slope facing the south, if we lit the fire at the bottom, it's going to gain momentum and go up the hill. But if we start up at the top and we at the road, and we put some fire on the ground to get the road, and it's going to burn, it's going to basically burn itself out on the road. and then we took another strip of fire and another strip, and then we start to build a buffer area that we can build from. So that's generally how you do broadcast burning.
And months of preparation goes into it. So, you have a project area and we'll have lines, containment lines around that unit where we'll, treat harder, dig line, get it down to mineral soil, or, different tactics to create that line that we don't want it to get outside of. So, yeah.
You'll get cold?
So I just got the text message. So after Nate notified dispatch that we were starting our test fire, all the fire departments in the county get a page, or a text that says that we're doing our test fire. And then when we're a go or a no-go, then that goes out to everybody else. So that way we notify, that just helps everybody know. This morning we talked with Sugarloaf Fire because they have great eyes right over here. But a lot of this is outreach to the public, making sure that everybody understands, yes, we're burning, no, it's not a problem. And then hopefully days like today are helping you all understand that what we're doing is actually a good thing. And everybody has an opinion on everything, but a lot of time goes into this. And the average amount of time it takes to get the qualification to be a burn boss for a low complexity burn is probably 7 years, 6-7 years.
5 to 7 maybe.
Yeah. To go to a moderate complexity burn boss, so an RXB2, it's like the Boy Scouts. The longer you're in this, the more merit badges you get. So instead of merit badges, we get qualifications. So I think it took me 17 years to get my type 2, my moderate complexity burn boss. And we don't even have any high complexity burn bosses on the forest. And generally high complexity means that we're using aviation assets, but that doesn't necessarily drive it. When we were burning over in Granby this last fall, we were using a helicopter to drop little spheres called ping pong balls, and there's potassium permanganate in the ball, and we inject it with glycol and then drop it out within the unit, and that starts little tiny fires. It's not like Howie Long and Firestorm, if any of you saw that. They don't explode with fire. It's a very gentle little, but starts little controlled fires. So we can see here our smoke is actually pretty minimal impact. A lot of that is because there's so little snow on this. But consumption seems to be pretty good. You can see sort of the skeletons Nate was talking about up here, but this will burn down. And ideally, the reason we don't go in and put these things out very quickly is we want them to consume the materials. We want this to be a pile of ash at the end of the day. So,
Mike mentioned community outreach. One thing this is part of it, but we're continuously trying to improve that. With mountain communities such as this, we have a lot of mountain communities all across the forest that we have piles near. And historically, it's been kind of tough to try to reach those communities with, just an email or, so looking for ideas on that, little Facebook niches that we don't know about. So we're trying to work more with the volunteer fire departments in those areas to, spread the word, amplify the word for us. So what we need is sort of ambassadors, community ambassadors to take that flyer that Mike just handed out, give it to your friends, you pass it around to communities.
Did you get one?
QR code, all those things. So.
I work for the Forest. You with the Forest Service, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
Cheers.
I think in the end, you got to think about from a homeowner point of view, right? I mean, the Forest Service is a piece of the puzzle. Local homeowner, house protection and defensible zone is a piece of the puzzle. Local fire departments are a piece of the puzzle, right? And obviously they're different agencies, but I would think that you really want to get the local fire departments and volunteers going door to door, starting with, hi, I'm from the fire department. Let me tell you why, if there's a fire here, we're not going to fight around your house, right? Because here's all the things. If you're interested, call me. I'll come back. for a 2-hour session, explain to you what you need to do, so next time we come by your house, we're going to want to fight the fire at your house because you've made it possible for us to do so. And then, by the way, in addition, you know, there's the Forest Service piece, which is the fuels and the stuff you're doing here. And then there's the, you know, there's the county, there's all these different programs which are separate. And if someone could go, you know, you got to find somebody, and probably it's more the local. You guys are more dispersed across a bigger area.
The problem with going door to door in the mountains, there's a lot of people that live in the mountains for a reason. And knocking on doors is actually a very dangerous thing to do.
You can send a letter, but I mean, I'm talking about that.
Yeah, but we work closely with our fire department partners.
Here's, you don't realize this, but the local fire departments run up and down the road and they practice the 10-minute triage tests. And they know which houses they're not going to defend. But the homeowners don't know that the firefighters are doing that, and they don't know what the conditions are based on which they're making those decisions. And it kind of, and then, you know, the whole thing cascades into there's a systemic issue here, and it's, and I agree as a homeowner that I'd love to have more of the neighborhood aware of all that and engaged in that, and it would solve your issue too, because once you get into that, you start to understand what you guys are doing. And
Yeah, we're trying to tie it all in. Like that is the key that you're talking about. That is it takes a village, you know. It takes
but
all the
it's
agencies,
from
the
a homeowner
homeowners.
point of view, it's a holistic picture. It's not just you guys.
Right.
And that's
piled
how
in.
Yeah, and that's where we're getting
fortunate
at.
in Boulder County to have wildfire partners who do.
Yeah, they do
those
their piece of it. I mean, there's all these pieces of it, but it still lacks a little bit of a.
This is a great start.
Yeah.
Thanks.
What you're doing right here.
Thanks.
So the only thing is,
it's
a
people were
weekday.
not able to do so.
Well, the problem is we're driven by burn windows.
We're doing it indirectly.
And
So, you know, we're sending out our news.
literally, this is about as fast as the Forest Service can move. And the fact that I got in a little bit of trouble kind of pushing people to make this happen so quickly because we had this unit right next to the road, because I can't take you all and march you out to the middle of nowhere. But to have, you know, we've got out of area resources in town right now. The Nature Conservancy is in on a cooperative agreement. And so we've got, 12 of them here now that are helping us burn. So when we've got the resources and we've got a project next to the road and we're in the mode right now of burning, because it takes a lot to sort of get this engine rolling, it's very hard for us to say, oh, we're going to do it on a weekend. It was like we saw the window and had to go for it. So to your point, what I would say is what you need to do is start becoming a neighborhood activist. You need to get with your neighbors and say, because if you come to the fire department, and I was a volunteer with Netherland forever, if you come to the fire department with one person saying, I need to do this, that's one thing. But if you come and say, I've got a neighborhood of 5 or 10 or 15 residents that are all willing to work together, that's how you can help amplify the work.
Yeah, and we talk about it, and we try to spread the word. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's becoming, and you guys have been doing your part of it. You know, Chad knows I've been involved in Foresight too for a decade or so.
Yeah.
Back to lawsuit letters about left piles. But you know, now things are moving. Like the map. Are you running that map? It's so, I don't know how long it's been there, but I love that. That map. I never knew about it. It's like, wow, I can tell exactly what you've done, what's kind of right now, what's planned, it's beautiful. And then the emails we're getting, and you guys are moving. I was like, wow, you guys are doing a lot. I've never, you know, every year the volume that you guys are doing is increasing, right? Which is what we wanted, because you know all this stuff was left behind, and we're having more. So I mean, I can see, you know, I can see that things are, you know, going and moving. And,
Well, and funding matters for us.
I
You know,
know
I mean,
funding
because of the bipartisan infrastructure law, you know, and the priority landscapes, we're getting money to hire people. We're getting, you know, a lot of different ways that we can move these things forward.